Well, for over 3 decades, the H-1B visa has been the single biggest bridge between Indian talent and the American economy. But in 2025 and 2026, that bridge has started to crack. A 100,000 fee, a rewritten lottery system, salary hikes that could price out entry-level workers entirely. Now, the US may scrap the H-1B 60-day grace period after job loss, putting Indian professionals and their families at risk of sudden immigration uncertainty if the proposal is finalized. Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX Deepdive. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and today we break down exactly what's changing, why it's happening, and what it means for the hundreds of thousands of Indian families whose American dream runs through this one visa category. So first, the H-1B is a US work visa for specialty occupations, jobs that typically require at least a bachelor's degree. Think software developers, engineers, doctors, researchers, financial analysts. Employers sponsor foreign workers for these roles, and historically the visa has run for 3 years, renewable up to 6. Every year the US government caps new H-1B visas at 85,000, 65,000 general slots plus 20,000 reserved for people with a US master's degree or higher. But demand is enormous in recent cap cycles. The USCIS has received over 750,000 registrations chasing those 85,000 spots. So the government runs a lottery. Depending on the year, Indians have received anywhere from 58% to over 70% of all H-1B visas issued. In fiscal year 2024 alone, 283,000 Indians received H-1Bs. That's roughly 71% of the total, and no other country comes close. China is a distant second at around 11 to 12%. That's why people call the H-1B a safety net for skilled Indian graduates. It's the primary legal pathway for STEM talent to study in the US, get hired, and eventually build a life there. When people talk about the safety net being under threat, they mean the program that 3 generations of Indian professionals have relied on is being fundamentally rewritten. So what is the 60-day grace period for H-1B workers created by regulation a decade ago? Well, the 60-day grace period went into effect in early 2017. So far, under this rule, E1, E2, E3, H-1B, H-1B1, L1, O1 and TN non-immigrants and their dependents have been granted a safety net for 60 days or until the principal's I-94 arrival departure record expiration date, if that comes earlier, and if the candidate's employment ceases. For this brief period, the visa holders of the aforementioned categories are not considered to have failed to maintain their non-immigration status after they lose their job. While the DHS has always had the discretion to refuse or shorten the grace period, it allows impacted foreign nationals to seek employment in the same non-immigrant category. They may also change status without departing the US. Although currently merely a proposed regulation, the rule is under review at the Federal Office of Management and Budget. However, if implemented, it would eliminate this grace period offered to certain visa holders and their dependents after the principal applicant loses employment before their period of stay expires. Consequently, Indian impacted foreign nationals and their dependents would be forced to immediately leave the US. They would no longer be accorded the ability to change status or look for new employment opportunities given the direct hit to their legal status in the country. After clearing the OMB review, the proposal will be published in the Federal Register for public comments. Additionally, the US State Department introduced the expansion of screening and vetting for H-1B and dependent H-4 visa applicants in December, making it mandatory for them to adjust their privacy settings on all social media profiles to public. Now let's get into what's actually changing. This isn't one single policy, it's a series of moves. Move 1. The 100,000 fee in September 2025, the Trump administration signed a proclamation imposing a one-time $100,000 fee on new H-1B petitions filed from outside the US. Previously, employers paid somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 per petition. This is a massive jump, and it's specifically aimed at making companies think twice before sponsoring a foreign national or a worker over a domestic one. Move 2, rewriting the lottery. In December 2025, the Department of Homeland Security finalized a new rule. It took effect in February 2026. That replaces the old random lottery with a wage-weighted system. Instead of every applicant getting one entry regardless of salary, workers in the highest wage tier can now get up to 4 entries in the pool, while entry-level workers get just one. On paper, this rewards higher paid, more experienced applicants. In practice, it disadvantages fresh graduates and entry-level hires, which happens to be where huge share of Indian applicants sit. Move 3, raising the salary floor. The Department of Labour has proposed a rule to raise required minimum salaries for H-1B workers by 21% to 33% depending on experience. The steepest jump is for entry-level, wage-level workers. The required minimum salary would jump from roughly the 17th percentile of wages in their field to the 34th percentile. That rule is still in the proposal stage, with the administration expected to try to finalize it by late 2026 or early 2027. Move 4, tougher enforcement. The Labour Department has launched hundreds of investigations into companies using H-1B visas, and there's been a sharp increase in social media and background checks that have delayed visa renewals, leaving many H-1B holders stuck outside the US, unable to return while their applications are in limbo. The administration's stated goal, in its own words, is to stop companies from using H-1B as a way to hire cheaper foreign labor instead of American workers, and to prioritize higher paid, more specialized roles like doctors and researchers over what officials have called tech consultants. Critics, including many employers and immigration researchers, argue the visa was never primarily about cheap labor to begin with, and that these changes will push talent and the companies that want to hire them toward countries like Canada, Australia, Germany, and the UK instead. So how does it affect Indians? This is where the story hits home, because Indians make up roughly 70% of this category. This disproportionately affects Indian applicants and their families. Some numbers to put this in perspective: one estimate puts the total H-1B household population, visa holders plus spouses and children, over 1.2 million people. If around 70% of that is Indian, we are talking about roughly 900,000 Indian nationals whose visa status, jobs, or family plans are directly affected by these changes. And there's a ripple effect at home too. Fewer certain pathways to the US may push Indian students to rethink where they study altogether, with countries like Canada, Australia, Germany, and the UK positioning themselves to absorb some of that talent instead. So where does this leave things? What's clear is this: the H-1B program that generations of Indian professionals treated as a reliable ladder to America is now anything but predictable. Ambassador Sushil Singhal, a former diplomat, is joining us on the program to talk more about this. Ambassador Singhal, appreciate you being here with us, sir. What do you make of this harsh rule being implemented by the Americans? You know, some of their top tech companies, as we all know and you know as well, are run, headed, and made successful by Indians.
Thank you, Vineet, for having me in the program. No, I think it's what Trump administration is trying to do with the H-1B visa system. It's I think it's helping, because the kind of talent US gets from India, even you mentioned over 71%. It's a figure. Almost 71% of the Indians take advantage. Because, as you rightly mentioned, that most of the tech companies today in US are being headed by Indians, which clearly shows that H-1B visa system has helped not only the Indians but Americans more, because they get the talent which they very much require, and which shows when the Indians are heading down. But President Trump, in his anxiety, I think is the term, to make sure that the jobs goes to the Americans, he's trying to curtail this system, this pipeline of the talent which feeds American tech companies and American economy. Whether he will be successful, I have my doubts, because if there is a talent available in US, so I'm sure these American companies will use local talent, because bringing an outsider is always more expensive. So there is a requirement. That's why these companies were hiring Indian talent. And by tightening these rules, like the 60 days, the grace period which was given for the change of job, now they want to eliminate virtually or to stop. The whole idea is that people should not get the green card and people should not come to US. Ultimately, if this all these measures you also mentioned about $100,000 fees, greater scrutiny, and other restrictions which Trump administration is trying to put in on the people who are coming to US for jobs, will ultimately lead to the simple consequence that the Indians or the foreign workers will stop looking at US as an option. Of course, in my view, in long run, it will benefit India because we need talent for AI, semiconductors, advanced technology areas, advanced systems. So this talent will become available to India. So
All
it
right,
in the
sir.
long run it will benefit us. But in short run, yes, it will be a shock because as you rightly mentioned about the figure, about almost a million people are going to be affected over the period of time if these changes are affected. So this, I think, will become an issue, no longer an immigration issue,
All right,
but
sir.
an economic
All right,
issue
sir. We've
also.
run out of
Thank you.
time, but I appreciate your perspective, sir. We're going to take a short break on that note. Be right back.